Welcome to the NIHR Dementia Researcher podcast, brought to you by dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk in association with Alzheimer's Research UK and Alzheimer's Society, supporting early career dementia researchers across the world.
I'm Dr Anna Volkmer, and I'm delighted to be back in the hot seat today, hosting this week's Dementia Researcher podcast. Now, we're going to be discussing cognitive stimulation therapy, or CST. And for those of you who don't know, this is a behavioural intervention for people with mild to moderate dementia. Now, as a clinical academic speech and language therapist working with people with dementia in the UK National Health Service, I have often delivered this intervention myself. And today I'm delighted to be joined by two researchers, Emily and Esther, who are from the Department of Clinical, Educational and Health Psychology at UCL. A couple of years ago, I actually attended an international CST, or cognitive stimulation therapy conference in Hong Kong. So I feel that this is the wrong time to start boasting about international travel, but I do believe that Hong Kong is actually where one of our lovely guests, Esther, is actually living or staying at the moment. Is that right, Esther?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Esther. So I'm currently in Hong Kong right now because of the pandemic, but I'll be returning to London very soon. And I hope you had a great time, Anna, when you were in Hong Kong. I guess a little bit about myself is I'm a final year PhD student. And for my PhD, I am making and testing virtual versions of individual cognitive stimulation therapy in Hong Kong as well as in the UK. So I became interested in working with people with dementia after double majoring in psychology and biology during my undergrad in the States. And dementia is it's a condition that combines a lot of my interests, and my grandparents unfortunately also have it. So there's also like a personal connection.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I love Hong Kong, by the way. It's a beautiful city. And the conference was at Hong Kong Uni on cognitive stimulation therapy. It was superb. It was a really great combination between a clinical conference and an academic conference, which was really, it was one of the first kind of combined conferences I attended. That was great. So sorry,
that's really good.
We've met you, but I'd really love for Emily to introduce herself if possible.
Yes, of course. So hi everyone, I'm Emily Fisher, and I'm currently the Programme Manager for the CST International study, which is based at UCL. And the study explores implementation of CST in diverse settings across the world. So that's 3 countries, Brazil, India and Tanzania. And I've also recently started a part-time PhD alongside my role, and that's studying implementation of psychosocial interventions in the UK. And just a bit about my background. So I previously worked in the UK charity sector in dementia and ageing charities before making the move into the research world through a master's in dementia at UCL.
So perhaps, Emily, before we carry on, you could actually explain, I mentioned a little bit about what cognitive stimulation therapy is. Perhaps you could explain to our listeners what cognitive stimulation therapy actually is. Would that be all right?
So as you said, cognitive stimulation therapy, or CST, is a behavioural intervention. So it's a brief evidence-based group intervention for people with mild to moderate dementia. And it typically involves about 14 sessions twice a week, which run for around 45 minutes each. And the sessions are structured with different activities, which are designed to be engaging and stimulating. And each session follows a general theme. So some of the examples of the themes are physical games, current affairs, and being creative. And one of the key things about CST is that it's guided by some key principles. And there's 18 in total. I won't go through them all, but some of them include focusing on opinions rather than facts, using reminiscence as an aid to the here and now, and generating new ideas, thoughts, and associations. So overall, it's a group intervention which is actively stimulating and engaging in a social and optimal learning environment.
Thank you, Esther. I always find that key principle around focusing on opinions rather than facts particularly helpful. I think it really reminds people to not test people with dementia on their memory or their knowledge, but actually ask an opinion-based question for which there may be many different answers or kind of positions.
Exactly, yeah. So it shouldn't feel like school or a test, or, you know, it's challenging, but not putting people on the spot. It's kind of getting them thinking and sharing ideas and opinions, but in a kind of low pressure, supportive environment.
That's brilliant. I'm always trying to explain what those kind of opinion-based questions look like. And I think I often say things like, which is your favourite, or which of these do you think have something in common, or which of these, you know, I guess it's about asking people what they think of something, isn't it? That kind of stuff. If I was somebody who had mild to moderate dementia in the UK, would I be able to access this through the National Health Service?
Should I take this one? Yeah,
Sure.
So you would be able to access CST through National Health Service or NHS memory clinics. So these are the memory and assessment centres where people first get a diagnosis of dementia, and following the diagnosis you'd be offered CST, and we did an audit recently that found that about 85% of memory clinics are offering CST. So it's not everywhere, but it's really widely available through the NHS as a post-diagnostic intervention. There's also other places where people could access CST. So there's longer term CST, which is known as maintenance CST, as well as individual CST. This doesn't tend to be delivered as much through the NHS. It's often delivered through third sector organisations, for Age UK as one example.
Thank you. That was a bit of a trick question, really. I had a hidden agenda. I have myself delivered CST and actually in kind of outpatient settings, in day centres, but also in nursing homes and wards. And often it's been myself and or the occupational therapist and or the psychologists who've kind of either collaborated or led on them. And I think that's really helpful for people to know, isn't it? It's not necessarily owned by one discipline. It's actually something that spans across disciplines. It's often delivered along by the multidisciplinary team. But perhaps, Esther, you could tell us about the actual evidence. Is there any actual evidence, and what are the outcomes from CST? Does it actually work? If it's delivered, let's hope so.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, and it does work. So multiple clinical trials in the UK and also globally consistently demonstrates that CST significantly improves cognitive function, independence, and well-being. So these are some of the key outcomes of CST. So the CST research itself actually started quite a while ago now, in 1998. And the first major study came out around like 2003. And since then, it's been tested in many different countries. And now it's offered in, I think, more than 34 countries. It is the only non-drug treatment recommended by the UK national guidelines. So how does CST exactly work? It's a bit unclear, unfortunately. We don't really know exactly what are the active ingredients of CST. So that's research still needs to be done there. But we do know from past studies that it stimulates executive function and brain areas that relates to language and also memory processing. CST was also designed based on theories and concepts like reality orientation, reminiscence therapy, use it or lose it, biopsychosocial model, and multisensory stimulation. That's a lot of different theories and concepts, but I think what my supervisor did, so she developed the original CST, is she looked at what was working in the past and kind of picked different pieces of it and came up with like CST. So we have some idea of how it works, but not exactly. So
Yeah. And that's Aimee Spector, Professor Aimee Spector, isn't
Professor
it?
Aimee Spector, yeah, sorry.
No, she was my second supervisor on my PhD, actually.
Oh, great. I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's and I remember where I've talked to her a lot about how it works, and I remember saying I'd love to do a conversation analysis study, like video recording the CST therapy sessions to see what people are actually saying.
So yeah, this is a little bit off tangent, but on the this is not part of my PhD, but we're looking like at fidelity as well. So I made a fidelity measure for CST as well as ICST. So we're recording all the sessions and looking at how people, what are they saying and exactly, and then trying to analyze that. So
oh, that's interesting. So you're recording them, transcribing them, and kind of looking at the key components, but not necessarily using conversation analysis. Perhaps this is a conversation we should have online.
yeah. Where I have a fidelity measure, so I'm checking off specific things, but so not the same as, maybe not the same type of analysis. But
no, I've done both fidelity measures. This sounds like a whole nother podcast, I think, because I think it's such a hot topic, isn't it? And it's a particular methodology unto itself. But I can imagine, maybe if you've got those lovely recordings, I can imagine that would be a great resource for lots of different research studies to analyse what's going on in those therapy sessions. It's so exciting and so important because it's delivered. So if it's being delivered, it would be really helpful for us to know what the active ingredients are, because I mean, not only the pandemic, but certainly I've been in situations clinically or known of colleagues where they want to deliver these interventions and they can't always deliver them to the letter. And so I know that, and the pandemic is a good example of that. So I wonder how the pandemic, what do you two know of how the pandemic has affected the delivery of CST? And has that kind of inspired you to do your virtual, because you're working on these virtual versions of CST, aren't you, Emily? Maybe we should come to you first.
Yeah, definitely. So I can talk about the impact of the pandemic on our CST international study in Brazil, India and Tanzania. So the study started in September 2018 and got off to a flying start with stakeholder engagement and the development of implementation plans so that we could try and embed CST into routine practice or check if that's possible. And then 2020 came along, familiar story across lots of research projects. We had to pause participant contact. I think initially thinking a few weeks, a few months, sort of cautiously optimistic at the time. But as time went on, it became clear that it wasn't going to be possible to restart face-to-face groups. So there was a separate piece of work going on at the University of Hong Kong, developing a virtual CST protocol. So a protocol for delivering CST over Zoom. And this hadn't been done before. And we were wondering, is this going to be possible? We all had a vision of what CST was in our head, which is groups of people in a room, throwing balls to each other, painting things. And we thought, how will this work over Zoom? But the team at Hong Kong and a group of trainee clinical psychologists at UCL have tested, or they're in the process of testing virtual CST in a randomized control trial. And this was the protocol for this virtual intervention that we have used to be able to continue delivering virtual CST through the CST International study, which has allowed us to maintain participant contact and continue to collect data. And also, I think which is really key is to provide, where interventions and participant contact and services have been paused or put on hold. It has felt really positive to be able to offer this virtual intervention at a time when people are isolated, and that has felt yeah, like a really good thing.
Yeah, positive influence. So first of all, though, had you signed up to a job, Emily, where you thought you'd get to go to India, Brazil, and is that
exactly?
Oh no!
Exactly.
How disappointing.
Yeah, so I go on lovely virtual world tours through Zoom. But yeah, no international travel as of yet. But
so, I can imagine it's all coming up. Hopefully, I say hopefully, all things being well. So it's interesting though that there was already a virtual version being developed over in Hong Kong. Yeah. It sounds like there was, and actually it makes sense, doesn't it? There really potentially already was a need for a virtual version of CST. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think the virtual CST project in Hong Kong was actually planned like way before the pandemic, because I guess there are people who lack transport provision. There are people that have limited mobility and other health issues that prevent them to get to like a CST group or like in-person one. So so they were ahead of the curve in planning this, like I think way before the pandemic. And I think when the pandemic hit, it just like made sense that this really needed to this research it's really helpful. And so I actually collaborated with them for my PhD project, which has been very helpful.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you've been able to collaborate with an existing group.
Yeah, so because I was developing it in Hong Kong as well as the UK simultaneously at the same time, so having the Hong Kong team working on it a little bit before like I did, it was very helpful because they kind of helpful in terms of like cultural adaptation as well as the virtual aspects of it. So
yeah, you didn't have to reinvent the wheel, although there's already a protocol, isn't there, for delivering CST. Did you have to redesign the actual protocol in order to deliver it for the virtual world?
Yeah, for my particular project is I have to like redo it because it's individual, so the sessions, the themes are different from the group version. So
that makes sense.
But maybe Emily can comment on the group version.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, for the group CST, there is already quite a comprehensive protocol and different manuals that people follow. But yeah, obviously you couldn't follow that to the T for virtual CST. The team at UCL and at Hong Kong University carried out stakeholder engagement and field testing. So they spoke to people with dementia who had been in virtual CST groups and people who delivered virtual CST, along with some service managers from the charity sector, just to get an idea of what kind of adaptations would be needed and what kind of support would be needed to run virtual CST groups. And yeah, the output of that, there's some, we've published some provisional guidance for running virtual CST groups on the International CST Centre website. But hopefully by the time the podcast is out, we'll also have a paper published which outlines the stakeholder engagement and field testing work, and then also has a full protocol to follow for virtual CST.
So that's for the groups, but you're also, I think it's Esther, your work is around individual CST, is that right?
Yeah, so individual CST, do you want me to talk about individual CST?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about the individual. It's quite different, like, and
yeah,
Emily painted this picture of, and this has been my experience of delivering it, this picture of people sitting in a group, answering questions, quizzes, throwing balls to one another, whereas individually it must be quite different.
Yeah, it's very different. So I think in like a typical in-person CST group, there will be around like maybe 8 people in a group, so it's quite like a number of people. I think in the virtual version, they probably have like 4 to 6. So individual is definitely different. But I think there was a need for individual even before the pandemic. So because there are people who just cannot join groups due to like sensory impairments like hearing loss or things like that, as well as people who just cannot travel. Because I think with the original in-person individual CST, the facilitator would go to the person's home and then deliver, which is very helpful if the person is in more moderate stages of dementia, because then they might not be able to participate in a group like people with milder dementia. So, and we thought that it's hard for people to engage, like even for me, like to engage in a video conferencing like platform. It's much easier to have meetings in person. And on top of that, people with dementia may not be the most familiar with technology. Some might find video conferencing a little bit confusing and distracting. Some might think like they're looking at a TV and why is the TV talking to them? Like can get a bit overwhelming as well as confusing. So we thought that some people might be able to engage better on a one-to-one basis, especially if they are more moderate. So the original version of individual CST that's in person was delivered by carers. It was also like 75 sessions long, so a lot longer. But recently, I think in 2019 or 2020, a shorter version that's 14 session came out. That was, and the psychologist actually delivered this version, and it had positive effects on people's cognitive function. I adapted my virtual version based on this newer version of ICST, and it's I would say that it's more similar to the group-based CST with that has like stronger evidence for cognitive function and also quality of life. So it's still called ICST though, but it's like the shorter version as well as the virtual version. Yeah.
And is that also delivered by the carers or delivered? No. Okay.
Delivered by psychologists. And I think that's actually a key difference, because I think interaction are just like really different if it's delivered by somebody who is family or someone that you're close to. I think past ICST studies from the original trial, they had a problem with adherence. And I think when you schedule an appointment with somebody, you're probably more likely to show up than if you schedule an appointment with, sadly, a family member or carer.
Absolutely. Makes a lot more sense. And if my other half would start telling me how to do some therapy tasks, I'd probably not be as receptive, if I'm honest.
But I think one good thing about like having the carer deliver it is it makes it a lot more accessible.
Yes.
Because then you don't need like somebody who is trained to deliver something, which could be potentially a manpower issue, which is part of the reason probably, this is not probably based on evidence, but it could be why ICST is less cost effective aside from the group aspects of CST. But I think by making it virtual, you're cutting down time, you're cutting down like potential costs as well. So which is quite beneficial, I think, especially for those who can't join groups.
And there are always going to be people who can't or don't want to. So if the difference is nothing or this, that's also still presumably on a certain level has some cost effectiveness element to it. It would be really useful to do some cost effectiveness evaluation, I presume. But I'm always people and they say to me, I've never been a group person, I'm not a joiner, don't even ask me to join. And I always forget that because I'm a big joiner, which I love a group. I love a group. So we've already started talking about some of the results and findings of your research, and that's what I actually wanted to ask you about next. So is it worth it? What are the results of your studies? Who wants to go first? Perhaps Emily, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I definitely can. So in terms of the findings from CST International, one of the things to highlight here is it's implementation study rather than an efficacy study. So we are collecting pre and post intervention outcome data in terms of cognition, quality of life, but that's just kind of one aspect of the study. So we're also focusing on kind of acceptability, ability to recruit participants, if it's possible to kind of embed CST into a service and change policies around service provision. So very initial findings are that virtual CST appears to be feasible and acceptable to both participants and facilitators, because that's one of the key things to consider if the facilitators enjoy it and find it worthwhile and it's not too time consuming. And I would add a caveat that it is really important to consider that we've not actually been able to roll out virtual sessions in every study site through CST International. So one of the sites in India and one of the sites in Tanzania, it just hasn't been possible. There isn't the technology infrastructure to deliver virtual sessions. So they have been able to deliver face-to-face CST sessions there with kind of COVID restrictions and safety considerations in place. But I think that's, it's kind of, virtual CST isn't this kind of catch-all intervention that will fix problems related to COVID restrictions or future geography or travel, travel problems, mobility issues. So that's definitely something that we'll be looking into more in terms of kind of the patterns of exclusion and looking at whether this might differ by socioeconomic status or particular characteristics.
Yeah, like candidacy characteristics. That makes sense. And I think you're right. I like that phrase. It's not catch-all. We don't have a magic wand for behaviour interventions, do we? It has to be much more individualised. I see that completely. And Esther, would you like to tell us a little bit about the results of your research now too?
I think it's definitely possible and worth delivering ICST virtually. So I was developing the intervention for Hong Kong as well as the UK. So my Hong Kong study was a small mixed method case series, which means, I think mixed methods means there's a qualitative as well as a quantitative component to it. So we're collecting both types of data. And the UK study is a feasibility randomized controlled trial. Both of these studies are very small, so I can't really draw any firm conclusions on treatment efficacy and things like that. But we found from the Hong Kong study that's completed already that delivering virtually works, because we didn't know if it was going to work in Hong Kong before, especially with older adults. Some older adults are a bit hesitant to use technology. So I actually was pretty hesitant when I took this project. I actually switched projects because this wasn't my original PhD project. I had to switch because of COVID. And a lot of people in Hong Kong, through the qualitative data, we found that they prefer the remote option because a lot of the carers were actually adult children of the people with dementia. So they had to work during the day. So some of the comments were like, oh, it's really hard to bring them to a care home, because I have to work. And when I come back to work, it's already really late. So having that remote option, especially I think at the time they were working from home, it was really easy for them to just switch on the computer and then receive therapy. And for the UK study, it's still ongoing and I'm blinded, so I can only speak from like the therapy sessions that I delivered. It seems to be going pretty well. I'm quite optimistic about it. We know that it's feasible, so I hope it seems like it is feasible, I should say, and acceptable. But I'm blinded to other participants, so I don't know yet. But the Hong Kong study will come out in soon, so it's under review right now. So that study I can say is feasible, acceptable, and also culturally appropriate.
And did you, I mean, one of the things that really impresses me most about this work is the collaboration internationally with Hong Kong. But going back to that conversation about opinion-based questions, I remember when I was at the conference in Hong Kong, I was chatting to somebody and they were saying in some discrete cultural groups, it's really not appropriate to ask people opinion-based questions. And so I wondered actually how and whether you've had to adapt the intervention for different cultural needs at all.
Yeah, so I definitely had to adapt the Hong Kong one culturally as well. But I think the good thing about my project is a lot of the work has been done already, like with the CST, like Hong Kong, they already have a manual out. So I can, while like ICST is a bit different, a lot of the content is similar. So I could I collaborated with them and then I used a lot of the information. But with individuals, because everyone is so different, I had to add quite a bit more cultural adaptations on top of what was existing. But the good thing about CST, it does offer a very flexible template that's feasible for different cultures. So the general content and structure of the therapy remained the same. Most of the changes I made were the content, like part of the content, I guess, like to make things a little bit more familiar and more familiar for the participant. An example of this is I rephrased some sample questions. Who would you invite if you were to host a party? I changed it to who would you invite if you were to host a dinner banquet? So because older adults in Hong Kong don't tend to have parties. They have like large meals with people. But coming back to your question about opinion-based, I think as a whole, maybe Hong Kong Chinese tend to be a little bit more reserved, but they do have opinions. And the good thing about one-to-one is that they kind of have to answer. I think in the group you can kind of like dodge answering, and I think that was one of the comments on like the CST Hong Kong study in the past. Like they said that some people were reserved and they were less likely to speak. But I think the good thing about one-to-one is the facilitator can really encourage them to, which works well actually for this culture. I like the whole Chinese culture, I guess. Yeah, we actually have a cultural adaptation guidance published from CST International. And I think the first step is engaging local stakeholders. So I did that with mine too. I talked to a lot of stakeholders and collaborators to find out if things were going to be feasible and also culturally appropriate. So that has been super helpful. Brilliant. Yeah, Emily, do you want to add to how CST was culturally adapted?
Yeah, of course. So there's some guidance. I think it came out in 2014. So it's kind of a template for adapting CST to different cultures. And as Esther said at the start of the podcast, I think CST is now delivered in about 34 countries. So the guidance is doing its job. So people are able to follow this guidance and culturally adapt CST. It's more than just translating, like you said. There's kind of lots of considerations to take into account. So there's stakeholder engagement, and then also thinking about theories and cultural knowledge. So kind of looking into the literature and looking at other interventions. And then there's a process of reviewing and testing and finalising the protocol for the adapted intervention. Yeah, see, that's, oh, sorry, I was just going to say
sorry.
that.
Go on.
So this is a process that took place across Brazil, India, and Tanzania before CST International. So then when the study started, there were the protocols kind of ready to go for people to start kind of testing through the implementation study.
Sorry, I always get really excited and people in podcasts, but I was getting excited because those you described those guidelines about adapting CST to different cultures, but I know that they've also been used to adapt other interventions as a kind of guideline for other behavioural interventions. Certainly we've been using them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's a useful guide. It's one of the, and CST is one of the first interventions that has made that bigger leap into, and it's much so, you know, relevant across the world internationally. And so it's really valuable for other interventions to be able to follow suit, and again, not have to reinvent the wheel. So we're using it to adapt some of our interventions for Brazil.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Principles, and the local people in Brazil finding it really, really helpful to have that guidance there, which is really exciting. Yeah, my last question though, however, I mean, we've talked about tech already. I want to come back to tech. Tech feels like a really, or technology feels like a really important topic, actually, both clinically and in the research world during the pandemic, because we keep talking about converting everything to being remote, to being online, to being virtual, but it's not always that easy. And I just we're all laughing. It really isn't, is it? And I just wondered whether you had any strategies where you've had to support people as part, have you had to build that into your protocol, this idea of actually doing some preamble, some pre-work with participants to make them feel more confident?
I definitely, when I screened a participant, before even screening, I would send them like guidelines on how to use Zoom, and also I would spend some time on the phone actually teaching them how to use Zoom as well. Yeah, but I think because my sample is quite small, I did exclude people who didn't have access to a computer or tablet or mobile phone, or basically video conferencing in the UK. But in Hong Kong, we were able to provide that for them if they didn't have a tablet. So we would bring the tablet to the person's home. But yeah, I definitely had to spend some time making Chinese and English versions of guidelines with pictures so they understand how to use Zoom. And to my surprise, it seemed okay. And we had quite a large range of participants too. Like in Hong Kong, we had people in cage homes. I don't know if you know what cage homes are. They're like the people from, I guess, a lower socioeconomical status. So their homes are like a box. So they don't have everything is in like super, super small space, and they didn't have a tablet, and we had to bring the tablet, but somehow because they had internet connection, even in that kind of environment, it worked. It was okay. And we have like people from the opposite end of the spectrum, like as well as participants. So it's really encouraging to see that this intervention can be can work, or for so different, can be delivered, I guess, to different types of people, even with the technology. And most people do have a carer though, like yeah. So, but in Hong Kong, most of them had carers or helping them, whereas in the UK, some were living alone and participated okay on their own. Like I just had a participant finish like 14 sessions, did miss one, but I also built in reminders in the program that I would send automatic emails one working day before each session, so they won't forget. And I also call them so it's quite a bit of work. But I think Zoom is quite easy to use. That's a video conferencing application we used.
I suspect that we are all developing lots of how to use Zoom guides across lots different across lots of different research studies. We should probably all share all our different resources. I suspect all us researchers are spending time recreating the same things. We should probably share those, shouldn't we? I mean, it sounds really obvious, but probably we probably haven't thought of that up to now, have we?
I think it's on our website actually.
That's good.
Well, not my version yet. I probably should do something about my version, but I think there's a group version that's slightly different on the CST website.
Maybe we could point listeners to that, because I think that could be a really useful resource for any research having to reinvent their own, couldn't it? Really helpful. Well, thank you both. I think that about wraps it up for today. So thank you to our guests, Esther and Emily. It's been such an interesting discussion, and it's really highlighted many of the barriers that there are in developing complex interventions, but also the ways to get around some of these issues also. So for anyone listening who didn't know about cognitive stimulation therapy or CST, now you do. And we have profiles on all today's panelists on our website, including details of their Twitter accounts. So please do take a look. And finally, please remember to like, subscribe in whichever app you're listening in. And remember to visit the Dementia Researcher website, where we publish new content every day, from careers and science blogs, job listings, funding calls and events, and so much more. Oh, and perhaps some of my own blogs too. But anyway, have a great day, and thank you for listening.
Brought to you by dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk in association with Alzheimer's Research UK and Alzheimer's Society, supporting early career dementia researchers across the world.